Good morning. I'm Josephine Reed Taylor, the Deputy Commissioner for the Technical College System of Georgia.
Houston Davis, Chief Academic Officer for the University System of Georgia.
When we gathered last year, we realized that the workforce needs of the future for Georgia require increased educational skills from all of the diverse populations within our state if our state is to remain competitive and if our citizens are able to take advantage of the opportunities available to help them create strong families and strong communities. As a result, we said that those of us in higher education had to no longer do business as usual, but that we had to be more intentional regarding helping students access the programs within our colleges, succeed, and graduate in a timely manner. We recognized the need to collaborate with K-12, business and industry, and with those of us in both public and independent colleges to meet the challenges of the workforce of tomorrow. The goals of this year's summit are to begin conversations that do several things. First, to extend and enhance the great work of what we've begun in our initial plans, and as the Chancellor indicated, Georgia was the first state to have all 60 of its public institutions submit plans to Governor Nathan Deal and his staff last fall to work together to understand the regional needs and identify priorities, to understand that what we need to do to realize the full potential of all Georgians, to align to economic needs and strategic areas of opportunity that are necessary to develop strong communities, and moreover, to hear from you what additional resources and support you need to make this agenda a reality. So as a result of that, we've gathered national and local experts to help us lay the foundation and context for this conversation this morning. And we'll have several presentations, and after that, we'll have an afternoon of workshops. So we will begin this morning with Houston Davis introducing our first presenter. Houston?
Thank you, Josephine. This day is going to be about rounding out this conversation about the importance of completion, the importance from an economic, social, cultural standpoint, and looking at the future of the state of Georgia. We are delighted to be able to have one of the leading voices of this conversation nationally, Stan Jones, the president of Complete College America, here with us to kick our conversation off. Stan has had 3 decades of success in Indiana reforming higher education. He served as a commissioner of higher education there, as a state legislator, as a senior advisor to the governor. He founded Complete College America on the principle that a network of states could really work together toward the commitment to substantially increasing the number of Americans with a post-secondary credential. As a member of the House of Education in Indiana, he developed expertise in higher education and higher education finance. He served for 16 years in the legislature and more than 5 years as a senior advisor to the governor of Indiana at that time, Evan Bayh. His service as Indiana Commissioner for Higher Education spanned 12 years, and the tenure crossed 4 different governors from both political parties. Stan, it's an honor to have you here today with us. We appreciate all your support for Complete College Georgia to this day.
Thank you. It's a pleasure to be here, and it's going to be an exciting a few days here. I can't help but to remember back when Governor Deal in the state capitol building kicked off Complete College Georgia just about a year and a half ago, and there's been a flurry of activity and a significant amount of progress ever since that day. And as Hank said so eloquently, when the governor says this is what he'd like, it's pretty clear what's going to happen. That kind of commitment from the governor is so crucial to the success of Complete College Georgia, but also crucial to the success of Complete College Georgia is every single one of you in the room and many, many back on the campuses, and even more importantly, the students that we are all working so hard to make sure that they benefit by a strong college education. Complete College America, we're about 3.5 years old. We have the single purpose of helping students complete college and a single strategy of working with states. And so we're very pleased that Georgia is one of our founding states. Not only that, but I would say one of our leading states. Clearly, with the work you're doing on performance funding, the work you've done on metrics in terms of measurement, and the fact that you have campus college plans as of last September for every campus in the state is significant and unparalleled anywhere in this country. So you should be very proud of what you've accomplished and prouder yet of what you're going to be able to do. One of the things that struck me during the recession was the fact that I think one of the unwritten stories of the recession is that people were concerned about housing and concerned about people buying things. The one thing that people bought overwhelmingly was a college education. And the country had peak enrollment during this period, and at the beginning of the recession, people started to go back to school and increased rapidly, so that we had the highest enrollment in the country ever during this recession. And so much so that the freshman class also represents this country better than they ever have in terms of demographics. We have more low-income students, more first-generation students, more African-American students, more Latino students, more non-traditional students going to college than we ever have before in the history of this country. All very impressive, and all signifying that people in these economic times have decided, with their modest incomes and with their other family and job obligations, that their big bet was going back to college. And that's a huge vote of confidence in colleges and universities across this country. But with it, too, we bear the responsibility to ensure that many of these people can be successful. And we have to ask that question: how successful have they been? And I think you know the answers as well as I do, that across the country, only about half of those that start for a 4-year college degree complete, and only about 1/3 of those that start for a 2-year college degree complete. And that fall class that we were so proud of, especially for the demographics, we've lost much of that by the spring graduation day 2 or 4 years later. And the people that walk across the stage are not nearly as representative of this country than those that started in the fall. And a lot of the hard-won access for non-traditional students, for first-generation students, we've lost along the way. They're not standing there on graduation day. The first step to tackling this problem, and Georgia is there, and we say this is the conditions for change. What do you need to do to start? Before you can do anything else, what are the key factors that you have to have in place? The first of those is that you have to have a goal. You need to know where you're going. Secondly, you need a good set of metrics to set benchmarks, to educate yourself, to use them to drive change, and to measure results. And you have those. You need plans in order to go about the business of making college completion happen, and you have that in place. And finally, you need to pay for results. And you're in the process of putting together a pretty impressive performance funding plan. Those are just the conditions of change, and those by themselves will not bring substantial change. And I hope today, in a few minutes, to talk about what we consider to be the game changers, those 4 or 5 things that would produce remarkable results, not at the margin, not 5 or 10% returns, but 50% returns, doubling and tripling results. The first place you have to start is on remediation, because for too many students, that's where they start. I think you know across this country, too many students start in remedial work. I could be in any state in the country and say that 60% of students attending a 2-year college started their career in remediation. And for many open access institutions, 4-year universities, it's 20, 30, or 40%. So people know that. I think what they don't know is, for too many students, their first experience is a remedial course and their last experience is a remedial course. They don't go any farther than that. There have been several impressive studies, many of them done by the Community College Research Center, essentially saying that remediation is fundamentally broken. It doesn't work. The studies that we've done, you've participated in our 30-state collection of data. The numbers are overwhelming. Significant numbers of students start in remedial courses, and they don't finish. They don't graduate. They don't even finish their first-year math and English courses. So we know that if you start in a remedial course, you have a 50% chance, you've cut in half your chances of graduation. If you start in remedial math, only about 1 out of 10 remedial math students actually complete a community college degree. And if you're placed in remedial math 3 levels down, and that's typically fractions and decimals, 5th grade math, you only have a 1% chance of getting any kind of certificate or degree of any kind. And that's true across the country. So we really have structural failure here. It's not that people can't teach good remedial courses, they do, but the structure of the remediation is just broken. And I say that because this is really about attrition. And so what happens is that when a student gets placed in a remedial course, it's kind of like the Scarlet R. They really don't want to go home and tell their family they're taking remedial courses. When they're asked about going to college, they don't want to tell their friends they're taking remedial courses. And so 1/3 of them quit, don't show for their first class. And even those that succeed don't show up for the next class or the next class, especially those that have several levels of remediation. And so we lose these students not because they can't pass the class, it's because they don't come to the next class or they didn't come to the first class, and they drop out along the way. And the longer these sequences are, the math is overwhelming. Even if you have a completion rate of, let's say, 70% in a course, 70% in the first course, 70% in the second course, 70% in the third course, you're down to 35% right there, let alone getting to the first level of math or English. And this is where we lose the students. It's really pretty overwhelming. It's so true that in the study the Community College Research Center did in Virginia, they opined that if, let's say Hank deciding temporarily that he was, or for the purpose of this discussion, he was smarter than I, decided that he would skip his remedial sequence and just take that first math course, and I trudged it through the remedial sequence, there's a much better chance he will succeed than I will succeed. Why? Not because Hank's smarter than me, he might be, but because he got right into that college level class, and I'm still working to get there. And so it's not the fault of the teacher, it's not the fault of the curriculum, it's the way this is structured, that there are so many places to drop out. And that's what we need to attack. The numbers are overwhelming. Achieving the dream, if you start in remedial math, their surveys say that 70% of those that start in remedial math don't even attempt the first level math course for 2 years. They don't even get there. In Texas, they have 40,000 students start in remedial math every year. 3 years later, they only have 6,000 or 15% that have completed the first level math course. So this is all about these huge numbers and the attrition. And so we need to attack that. And if we're concerned about access for far too many students, the access is to remediation. It's not to college level classes, and we need to change that. And so we advocate, and I know in Georgia, you're in the process of implementing several of these throughout the state, is thinking about remediation different. These students do need help, but they need help differently. Think about it as not providing remediation as a prerequisite, but as a co-requisite, simultaneous, just-in-time delivery. It can be as simple as this math course that maybe was 3 days a week. It becomes 5 days a week. One of the more successful courses is out of Baltimore, and they have their students stay 45 minutes after class for additional instruction. There are many different ways to do it, but essentially you're delivering the support at the same time these students are taking college-level classes. This is the kind of thing we need to do. And we all know the placement tests cannot predict how successful these students will be. They just can't. And so over-relying on these placement tests to keep students out is not the right thing to do. And the last point I want to make on remediation is that for far too many people, we're channeling them into college algebra when many of them would be better off with a quantitative literacy course or with a statistics course that's much more relevant to their field of study. And so we need to break that paradigm as well. Think differently about the kinds of beginning level courses that will align better with a student's program. But you have to attack remediation before you do anything else in college completion. The next big area is time. I like this because it's kind of against the grain of what we currently think. In many cases, we talk about people need more time. And that's true in some cases. I remember my grandmother always used to refer to me as a late bloomer. Even when I was in my 40s, I didn't appreciate it then. But recently, the federal government came out with their first 8-year graduation rate. The 6-year graduation rate for 4-year college is about 56%. The 8-year graduation rate was 58%. So those additional 2 years got us an additional 2%. If you're there at year 6, you may be living the dream, but you're not achieving the dream. Community colleges, it's even more important. We say life gets in the way. People change jobs, they get married, they get divorced, they have children, they move from different communities. Every time change happens, it's an opportunity for people to stop out. Stop-outs turn into dropouts overwhelmingly. We think, oh, stop out, come back. They don't come back. Especially when you have these long sequences. And so, for example, nationwide, it takes 3 years to get a 1-year certificate and 4 years to get a 2-year degree for a full-time student. Too many opportunities to stop out, too many opportunities to drop out. So what can we do about this? 3 primary things. Number 1, that was on cue. I'll take that with me the next speech I give. 3 things primarily is pay attention to the length of time it takes students, not the advertised time like 4 years or 2 years, but how long it really takes students to graduate. And you need to work on that. Several states have worked on credit caps, 120 credit hours for a 4-year degree. There's exceptions, and there should be. 60 credit hours for a 2-year degree. Many of the 2-year programs have crept up to 70 and 80 required hours. Those students are not going to graduate in any timely way. Paying attention to credit counts, students taking the right courses, counting toward their degrees, effective transfer policies. And I'm so impressed with what you've done. I think when we were first here about 3 years ago, Ron, we were talking about transferring 2 courses, 3 courses, and how many is it now? 27. Very, very impressive, very impressive. But they need to count. I had this experience the other day. When my son-in-law had gone back to the community college, he comes back with his list, and I said, what do you have? And he shows me the list, and he said, well, every one of these, they told me they transfer. I said, well, they transfer, but they don't transfer a 4-year program. And so these would be lost credits. And so we need to pay attention to length of time and to the credits counting. Second, there's no way to get around it. Full-time students graduate at 3, 4, 5 times the rate of part-time students. Part-time students graduate at a 4-year college or a 2-year college at about 15% rate. And it's simply because it gets stretched out so far that they can't persist. And so the efforts, and there are some strategies around having more students go full-time by how you arrange schedules, by how you work with financial aid, that we can change the mix and provide more students to go full-time. And third, and this is actually pretty novel, the idea that full-time students might take 15 credit hours. We have, for some reason, have a de facto strategy of taking 12. Well, you're already on the 5-year plan when you start out with 12. And it's because of our federal financial aid policy that essentially says 12 is a full-time load. But that puts students behind rather immediately. And the numbers are overwhelming. It's about credit intensity. It's about accumulating credit. I saw a great presentation. Actually, some of you may know Ron Henry, who was the provost at Georgia State. and he put up retention versus credit accumulation. And you can come back, but that can be a hollow number if you're not accumulating credit. How many credits you earn is so much more important an indicator than retention. And students need to accumulate 24 to 30 credit hours each and every year if they're going to graduate in any kind of a timely way. Choice is the next major area, and I like to talk about this one because it is so counterintuitive. As there's probably nothing more important to Americans than choice. We when we go to the grocery store, we like not one kind of ketchup, but we like 57 varieties of ketchup. We like different cars, different houses. Turns out that when it comes to college, too much choice is not a good thing for college students, and they drowned in it. They drowned because in many college campuses, there's one counselor for 400 students. We know students design their own schedules. They say, Ron, what are you taking this semester? They look at a course title and try to guess whether that's a good course to take. Or they say, well, it's not on Friday afternoon, I'll look at that one. And that's how they choose courses. And somehow these collection of courses turn out to be a degree. There's a famous study, actually, that was cited in 2 different psychology books. We know a lot about how people think and how they behave. We don't apply any of it to the field of education, however. But there are 2 great books. One's called The Art of Choosing, and the other's called The Paradox of Choice. And in both, they cite this study of, I call it the jam study. It's a farmer's market, 2 tables they've set up. They have 6 jars of jam on one table and 24 on the other. Many, many more people, as you can imagine, stop at the table with 24 jars. But 10 times as many bought at the table with 6 jars. Fewer choices, I can figure that out. And this is true throughout all the studies they do in psychology. 5 to 7 choices people can kind of handle. Some of you may have 401ks after the recession. They've done studies on 401k plans. The more choices you have, the less good choices you make. Either you freeze, leave your money in cash, because you can't decide, 25 choices, or you make poor choices. And this happens over and over again with all the studies. The optimum is this 5 to 7, 4 to 7 number in terms of choices. Instead, we give students way too many choices. I went back, looked online at my alma mater, Purdue University. I said, well, if I was getting a psychology degree, how would that happen? And so I went to the first screen, and they said, well, you take so many courses from the core, university core. I thought, well, this makes sense. And then I clicked on that, and over 120 courses popped up to choose from. Not really a core. So then, of course, they say, you go to the next grouping, they say you take so many from this grouping, so many from this grouping, and somehow that turns out to be a degree. So then I go over to engineering, which is what I graduated in, and it says, not surprisingly for engineers, the first semester, you take this. You take this calculus course, you take this physics course, you take this chemistry course, and you've got to take English. And the second semester, same thing. You take this. Then you choose an engineering discipline, and then it's a semester-by-semester plan all the way to graduation. And there are options. You get to choose what engineering field you're in, and there's options within those fields. And there's electives, but the core path is laid out for you, and they know that you need to take it in this sequence if you're going to be successful. Engineering is not unique. Students, they tell me, going for medical school, pre-med, is kind of a forced march. We know at community colleges that nursing has the highest graduation rate. A student wouldn't think of saying to the nurses, well, I really don't like blood. Could I skip that class and take this elective? Or take it in a different sequence? That doesn't happen. The nurses know what you need to know in order to be a good nurse, and that's what the faculty does. Honors programs. Many honors programs are highly structured programs. I had the lieutenant governor of Illinois, I was talking with her about this, and she said, Stan, that was my first year of law school. I didn't choose. They told me what course and what sequences. Pretty typical for many programs, but not for many, many of the programs we have. So we say students make big choices. They make big choices to go to college, big choices to go to your college. You need to help them make the big choice of a major or a career. But after that, the faculty really knows best. If you're going to be an accountant, this is the way that you go. And so we're strongly promoting what we call GPS, guided pathways, that lays out, you first choose maybe 5 to 7, from a 5 to 7 meta-major plan. Then there's this academic map that I talked about that leads you all the way to graduation. These could be highly effective. They even include triggers, and so if you're not successful on the plan, you have to go see your advisor. And essentially, these are default plans. And so if I start the first year's courses, or I say I want to be a liberal arts, they're pretty well set for me. And I'm on that plan. I don't need permission to stay on the plan. I need permission to get off the plan. I need permission if I want to. I can take a different course, but I need permission. But I don't need permission to take the courses that lead me to the graduation in the field that I've chosen. These can be highly effective. You have one right here in the state of Georgia. Georgia State has some very impressive graduation rates, very impressive graduation rates for African American students, very impressive graduation rates for Pell students. We also pointed to Florida State University, and Arizona State is another one. You can go online and look at their e-advisor. That's a tool for students that lays all this out, that also keeps students and faculty informed. Highly effective. And these colleges are getting substantial results for all students, substantial results for low-income and minority students. The last major game changer that I want to talk about is structure. This is even harder for us, I think, to work through. And the best way for me to describe it is that when I went to, we first did a lot of work in Tennessee, and we met with Governor Bredesen early on. This is one, don't make this mistake. As we walked in, I turned to my colleague, I said, certainly he isn't going to ask me what I think Tennessee ought to do in the very first meeting. Well, we weren't 5 minutes into the meeting, and the governor turned to me and says, well, Stan, what do you think we ought to do in Tennessee? And I was like, I'm not sure, but we'll find out pretty fast. And we put together a plan after touring a lot of the colleges and universities in the state. And we actually, this was pretty interesting to us. It was one of our best things that happened to us during this odyssey. Near the end, getting ready for the recommendations, they set up a lunch for Governor Bredesen and myself. And knowing governors, I know that they don't have much time and they have less patience. So I know I needed to get to the point. So I prepared one sheet of paper, and on one side I put the graduation rates for the community colleges, which were about 15%. And on the other side of the paper I put the graduation rates for the Tennessee Tech Centers. Some of you may know about them, but about very few states have systems like this, but the tech centers are post-secondary, but they're one-year program. Community colleges only do 2-year programs. So the tech centers do 1-year nursing, community colleges 2-year nursing. Tech centers do 1-year business programs, community college 2-year programs. Tech centers 1-year computer science, community college 2-year. So the governor picks up the paper, and I didn't really call it out. He just couldn't help himself. He picks up this paper, looks at it, and says, tell me why my community colleges have a 15% graduation rate and why my tech centers have a 75% graduation rate. Why is it 5 times higher? And I said, well, Governor, interestingly, the students are very similar in terms of age, in terms of income level, in terms of representation of minorities. It's not that. You could argue that maybe some of them are more occupationally oriented and they might graduate at higher rates, but there are thousands of community colleges across the country that offer occupational programs that have low graduation rates. It's not that. It's the way they go to school. They go 8:30 Monday morning till 2:30 Monday. They come back on Tuesday, they do the same thing. Monday through Friday, it's a block schedule, 8:30 to 2:30. They take attendance, an underrated strategy. It's a holistic program, much in the way I talked about nursing. It's laid out for them. They don't choose the classes, they chose the program. I want to be a machinist. I want to be an accountant. I want to be in computer science. And this is the way you go to school. Highly effective, high placement rates in the industry. And not only that, not only do high numbers graduate, but many, many more of them graduate on time or with just a little bit more. So people say, well, Stan, and it's also a more integrated curriculum. And so, for example, they say in machining, which is now quite complex. You need to know a lot of trig and geometry. In a typical college, they'd send these students to a trig class, and we'd only get half of them back. We'd never see them again. But teaching this in context, we can have these students be successful. So people say to me, well, that's Tennessee, and that's the tech centers. That's not us. We're different. So if you go 1,000 miles away, probably as different as you can be to New York City from, let's say, Nashville, Tennessee, or Murfreesboro, Tennessee, they have a program that's block scheduled. You walk in, they say, Stan, do you want to go in the morning or the afternoon? You want to go the 8 to 12 block or the 1 to 5 block? They pick your classes. They require attendance. There are academic courses. 75% of their students transfer to four-year institutions. Not at all like the tech centers, except the structure. Their graduation rate is 55%. The citywide community college graduation rate is about 25%. It can happen, and it does happen in other parts of the country, so it can happen. And these are, like I said, these are appreciably higher graduation rates with colleges that do this. So in closing, we can spend, I could tell you 101 ideas for college completion, and maybe somebody's already written that book. You can do a lot that will have modest benefits, 5%, 10% benefits, but there are only 4 or 5 what I would call game changers, can make a significant difference. And so if you look at them, you need to have the performance funding because that makes a huge incentive for everybody to align their strategies with completion and with what's in the formula. But you also need to pay attention to remediation. If we don't break that, we won't be successful. The policies that we suggest, the programs that we suggest, those programs are not 5 or 10% more effective. They're double and triple more effective. Time intensity, I talked about that. Going full-time, those students are 4 and 5 times more likely to graduate. Taking 15 credit hours, significantly more likely to graduate. On-time degree plans, the guided pathway systems that we talked about, Georgia State, Florida State, Arizona State are getting significant numbers. And block scheduling that I just talked about, again, a quantum difference between our current strategy and what can happen. None of this has anything to do with the academic integrity of the institution, with the mission of the institution, with the faculty's creative freedom to teach their courses. It has everything to do with how we structure and deliver education. And we can dramatically change our college completion rates if we implement these game changer strategies. I'm pleased that Georgia's at the forefront of this movement across this country. I know you will continue to be, and I would encourage you to adopt these kinds of strategies. Thank you very much.